When you have a party, hope you're happy.
Welcome to Albert's Adventures Part 3, Episode 5. My guest for this episode is my friend Brad. He's a member of my Freedom Cell group, and he's interested in crypto and in the law movement, and also we're working on a garden together, so we have a few things to talk about. I want to start out talking about the garden. This is something that we started a couple months ago. We planted seedlings in these little pea pots and took them home, and they started growing in our windowsills, and then we planted them over at Phil's house about a month ago, and Friday we harvested a bunch of lettuce, and pretty soon we're going to have all kinds of vegetables, and so I'm really excited about that. And I think that the garden has really been a very important focal point for our group. Would you agree?
I would. I've noticed in my life that without a specific goal in mind, things just tend to go into the wind, right? You know, you don't really have, if you don't have something you're working towards, then by definition anything you do will get you where you're going, because you don't have anywhere that you are going. So I think having that very firm goal of the garden put in place has allowed our group to stay on task in a way and stay together, because we have a mutual shared thing to work on.
Yeah, and also it's been really valuable for me because I'm learning more about gardening and growing food. And I think, you know, if things continue getting worse, you know, it could get to the point where you need to grow your own food. So I feel like I'm not only, you know, having fun and hanging out with interesting people, but also developing a valuable skill. And it seems like it could grow into something really interesting if at the end of the year we have a bunch of extra food. Maybe we end up selling the extra food, and who knows, it could turn into some kind of business or something.
That would be my thought. I mean, I think I keep pushing for that one specifically. Like, I mean, I think everybody here, okay, let me back up for a second. I'm very entrepreneurial minded. The things I've been exposed to in my life have led me down that road, and that's just how I think, right? And I think that, you know, our group is a freedom cell, so the goal is to gain as much freedom as possible. And working for somebody else, especially a big corporate interest, doesn't necessarily align with the value of having individual freedom. But being entrepreneurial and being able to support yourself through your own work and being able to direct how that work is done lends itself to being free. And then in addition to that, I think everybody in our group, we have our values aligned in terms of wanting to grow food because we see it as a way to benefit nature, we see it as a way to benefit ourselves through healthier food, and it's a way to benefit, you know, the larger community in general, because we can provide that healthier food to people. So to me, that's just going to be a natural progression of the gardening efforts. At least that's the way that I see it in my mind.
Right on. And yeah, I think that that entrepreneurial spirit is part of what makes you so valuable to the group, because most of us do just have jobs and work. And I personally want to eventually get out of that and, you know, have a place out in the country where I grow food, or where I do something that I get paid for by regular people instead of having to work for a giant corporation. But it's hard, and you know, you're one of the few people in our group that actually has pulled that off, and that never really did do the, as far as I know, you've never really done the job thing, right?
I've had 2 jobs in my life. So right out of high school, I worked for a moving company, actually. So prior to that, I was interning, kind of like volunteering at a gym, because I liked doing it, right? And then when I graduated high school, I was like, okay, I kind of need to get a job and make some money. So I started doing that during the week. And I just came to the conclusion that, you know, I was waking up at 7 in the morning and working these long days moving stuff, and I was like, I don't really want to do this. So I'm like, I made this firm conviction in my head that okay, if it were a choice between doing this the rest of my life or being a homeless bum, I would pick being a homeless bum. So once I made that choice in my mind, it was like, it was very natural to just find another way to not have to do that.
How do I tell my girlfriend that? That's how I feel.
That would be kind of rough.
Well, let me introduce Andy real quick. Andy's our cameraman. You probably remember him from a previous show.
So we can see. What's up, guys? Yeah, been here before. Albert's my buddy. Brad's my buddy. We love Freedom Cells. It brought us together. People who can talk about different things and grow food and friendship, and it's really good to be around these guys. We've grown food. We're growing apple trees. We got 2 community gardens. We got friendship. Our group's getting bigger and bigger by the day. North Carolina definitely likes freedom, at least in these circles, and that feels good.
Well said.
Well, thank you for being here to film this, Andy. And also, I want to show off this little...
Oh yeah, we gotta just talk about this real quickly.
This is a Washington Post from, what is it, 1969?
July 21st, 1969, the Eagle has landed. 2 men walk on the moon.
And the moon landing is a very interesting story because at this point, looking back on it in history, it seems clear that there was no moon landing, that it was something that was done on a stage set. Basically, it was a movie that was filmed.
That did not go through the Van Allen radiation belt, man.
And
that device that looks like golden paper, no, that didn't happen. That's not the evidence, but that did not happen.
Yeah, that's one really interesting thing, is that the radiation shielding on this moon landing spaceship was supposedly made out of gold aluminum foil. And
that's what it looks like, does it not? I mean, the picture doesn't come through great on the video, but that doesn't change what's actually in that picture.
It looks like a dinghy that, would barely be seaworthy if we were to attempt to do that, and somehow it made it through space. But
yeah, 240,000 miles, one-way trip, mind you.
Yeah, it's kind of like Star Wars. When we first saw Star Wars, it looked totally amazing. And now if you watch Star Wars, it's obviously just a bunch of little plastic things that they're filming up close. But, 20 years ago it looked amazing. And it's the same with the moon landing. 20 years ago it looked... am I off the screen there?
No, I think it just looks that way.
20 years ago, the moon... or more than 20 years, what is it, 50 years now. 50 years ago the moon landing looked amazing. And now you look at it and this little thing made out of sheet metal with gold aluminum foil on it obviously didn't fly to the moon and back. There's just, it's obviously...
Did you guys ever see that video where like the little 8-year-old girl, I think I might have told you guys about
Buzz Aldrin.
She's interviewing Buzz Aldrin, right? And she goes, she's got her arms crossed, right? She's got her arms crossed like this, and she goes, why haven't we been back to the moon in such a long time? And he's like, that's not an 8-year-old's question. That's my question, because we didn't go there, and that's the way it happened. And he goes,
yeah, at some point I want to do
if it didn't happen.
At some point I want to do a whole show on that, but for now I want to get back to talking to Brad about crypto. And
Albert does a great job of keeping us on track. He's on an hour timeline. You're right to do that, my friend.
Okay, so Brad is kind of a crypto expert. He knows a lot, at least compared to me. He knows a lot about
crypto. I would not take the title expert, but I know a little bit about it.
and I've learned a lot about it from him. He showed me how to get set up with a wallet. What was that wallet that?
To any beginner who wants to get into multiple coins, I would recommend the Exodus wallet. It's very easy to download. Android, iPhone, desktop. You can use the same wallet on all 3 of those, and it has most of the major coins, virtually all of the major coins, and it also has a built-in exchange within the wallet, so you can swap in and out of whichever coins you want of those ones that are available on it.
So the Exodus wallet it kind of has an exchange service built into it.
Right. The fees are kind of high, but it's very convenient. And it's self-custody, so you're not holding your coins on an exchange. which, most of the time beginners do, but it's really not what crypto was made for. So it's like you're kind of defeating the purpose of crypto because somebody else is holding your money, whereas cryptocurrency was designed and is made to be outside of the banking system and outside of somebody else holding your stuff.
So if I had crypto, say I had Litecoin in Exodus, and I wanted to exchange it for XRP or something, how does that work? Would they actually send it to an exchange for me, and the exchange would do the transaction, and then they would send it back?
From what I understand, Exodus itself plugs into a service that basically just has an inventory of different coins. So imagine like a vending machine, right? That instead of putting quarters in, you could put any cryptocurrency in, and then everything in the vending machine is just another set of different cryptocurrencies that you can spit out in exchange for whatever you have. So it's one company that you're directly trading with.
Okay, that makes sense. And can we talk about some different cryptos? Like if I pull up CoinMarketCap, which is where the biggest cryptos are tracked by market cap, the biggest one is Bitcoin, second biggest is Ethereum, probably everybody's heard of those two. The third one is Tether, the fourth one is Cardano, which is fairly new. Fifth is Dogecoin. And can you talk a little bit about some of the more popular ones? Like Bitcoin is mostly used as an investment, right? There's reasons why it isn't really valuable to pay for stuff because of the transaction fees.
Yeah, so that's kind of I would call it the mimetic purpose, where it's the idea behind Bitcoin is shifting to is more like a digital gold. Reason being, like you mentioned, the transaction fees are high. So if I'm going to buy something small like a coffee or just a box of whatever at a flea market, it's kind of hard to justify in your head paying $10 for something and then having a $10 transaction fee in order to facilitate that. So it doesn't lend itself very well for a currency for everyday use. I mean, I think there's an argument to be made that going forward, you're going to see people transacting maybe larger purchases in Bitcoin, like real estate or anything else that would be a higher dollar figure, because then you can justify that $10 fee, which it's not always $10. It can vary, but for example, that would be a typical fee that you could see. But it's gone up to $50, sometimes even $200 at a time.
But it doesn't go up with the amount of the purchase?
No, it's the transaction fees are more determined by the difficulty, how many transactions are being sent at the current time. So the Bitcoin network can only handle a certain number of transactions per second, and if there's 10 transactions that are in queue, then the price is going to be here. If there's 50, then the price is going to be here. It's just supply and demand for throughput of transactions that determine the cost, along with some other things that are more technical that I probably wouldn't even be qualified to speak on, but it varies based off that, not the amount that you're sending.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I guess to be able to process transactions is such a high bar that not very many people can do it, and that's why there's more demand than supply for processing.
Well, anybody can send a transaction, it's just you have to have the amount to send the fee to. So
no, I mean to actually process the transactions, to provide that service and charge the $10 or whatever.
Well, the Bitcoin network itself does that. So that's all autonomous. It's all determined by computer code, right? Yeah, that's how the blockchain works. There's some, I mean, it's probably higher by this point, but just for example's sake, we'll say there's 10,000 Bitcoin nodes on the planet. That means that there's just each computer that's interacting with the network itself, the Bitcoin network, and there's all of those computers are processing those transactions autonomously with the way that the cryptographic computing works. So it's not that, kind of lost my train of thought here.
Well, what I'm getting at is, suppose I wanted to process transactions. I'm like, wow, you get $10 for every transaction. I'll process transactions and I'll collect that $10. Why can't there be some kind of, say, price war where somebody offers to do it for a cheaper price?
Because the way the code's written, it only allows a certain amount through. So the more transactions that are pending, it's just going to bid that, because there's a finite amount of transactions that can fit through the network.
So basically, Bitcoin just inherently includes a high transaction fee based on the way it's programmed.
The technology is kind of, I mean, it was the first cryptocurrency. The technology is kind of old, and then there's some other programming choices that facilitated the fees being so high. But the root of it is the code itself is not conducive to eliciting cheap transactions.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And so, what about Ethereum? Does it have a similar problem to Bitcoin, or can you do the transactions pretty cheaply with Ethereum?
It does. So Bitcoin and Ethereum are both proof of work coins, which that means that all these computers are solving these cryptographic proofs and problems in order to compete to solve the next block. That's how the network's secure, because they're all engaging in, or doing cryptography on the computers, and they're I'm probably not the best to explain the game theory of how that works, but in short, Bitcoin and Ethereum both have that transaction fee problem because they're proof of work coins. There's other coins that are proof of stake, which are much more energy efficient as far as the amount of energy it takes to get a transaction through.
I've been reading about proof of stake a little bit, and I'm still a little bit foggy on how that works. I mean, I guess they go by how many coins you have, and you can deposit those coins into an unusable state, and that allows you to use them for voting on transactions. Am I getting it?
That's kind of so with Bitcoin, the way that they're earning the cryptocurrency, both transaction fees and new coins, is they're solving cryptographic problems. The difficulty of those cryptographic problems are the threshold for that difficulty is a lot lower with proof of stake coins, but instead so with proof of work coins, what people are contributing to the network is their computing power. That takes resources, that takes a beefy machine. You have to have a computer that can handle that type of computation. So they're invested in the network by virtue of those things that they're putting into it. With proof of stake, you can run it on much lower hardware machines and with much less energy, because your stake is the cryptocurrency that you've put into that locked state like you were talking about. So you're essentially earning interest on that state, but rather than interest, you're earning the new coins and the transaction fees, but it's essentially like interest.
And what's an example of one of these proof of stake coins?
So you mentioned Cardano, that's a proof of stake. I don't know much about it. I know that Ethereum is transitioning to proof of stake, but it's anybody's guess as to when that'll actually happen. It's, they've had talks where back in 2017 it was going to be done, or here in 2021, and it's still not. So if you scroll down, another couple of examples. Polkadot, as far as I understand, is proof of stake. I haven't done much research on that either. As far as the top ones here, I know all of those are, and they all have different little takes on it, so they'll have like slightly different protocols, but they fit into big categories. And
so say if I wanted to start mining Cardano, would I have to start out by buying a bunch of it in order to have a stake to allow me to mine it?
Yeah, you'd buy it and then you'd lock it in the staking contract, and then you would earn a share of the new coins that are minted.
Okay. And suppose I wanted to start using a crypto to buy stuff, like from maybe people on the agorist market, or just people that I know that are selling stuff. What would be the best crypto for that, for just buying stuff in small transactions?
There's a lot that would fit that description. And everybody has their own opinion, right? The hard part is finding somebody that accepts it, and then also you have to find somebody that's into it enough to know the difference between different coins. So there's a million coins that would fit the description of being able to facilitate cheap transactions in a fast way. Problem is finding people that will accept that. So you kind of have to go with something that's higher on the list, because there's going to be more people that have those, and there are more people that are familiar with them. Some people don't like Litecoin. I think for what you're talking about, that's actually a decent one for it, because the even though it's a proof of work coin, the transaction fees aren't ridiculous, and a lot of people know about it. and since they've heard it, they're willing to accept it more. I mean, you got XRP and XLM. I personally like those, but a lot of people that are into crypto don't. But they do facilitate very cheap and very fast transactions. I mean, they settle in 5 seconds, and the transaction fees are always less than a cent. So,
Are those both proof of work coins?
no, XRP and XLM are not. They're not proof of stake either. I don't know the actual term that they use for their consensus mechanism, but there are, and they're valid concerns. There's a lot of people, especially in the crypto community, like the more original crypto community, they call them bankers coins, and they're working with the banks. But they're also self-custodied and nobody can stop you. It's uncensorable. So there's ups and downs, and you really just have to gain a working understanding of all the differences and what they do in order to really, accomplish what you're trying to accomplish with it.
Yeah.
And
suppose I wanted to ask for donations in crypto. What crypto would be the best for that?
Well, I mean, anything. I mean, you just have to.
I mean, it would need to have a small. Is Bitcoin the only one that's prohibitive in terms of the transaction fee?
I would say that both Bitcoin and Ethereum, it depends on the time of day, it varies day to day, but both of those have high transaction fees. Until they fix that, they're not really viable as a currency, but they're in the process of fixing it, right? Crypto is still very new. So if you're trying to get donations, I mean, I wouldn't say that there's one that's better than the other. What I would say is that you'd want to ask for donations in coins that a lot of people are familiar with, because you're more likely to get donations then, because they already have the coin.
So I'd probably want to offer a few options.
That would be my suggestion, yeah.
All right. And before we go on to law, is there anything else that you think the audience should know about crypto and what's been going on? Like, do you want to talk about the crash that's going on right now and your theories?
Yeah, I'll give
on
my
that?
opinion on that. So, I mean, I subscribe to the stock to flow model, which, if people aren't familiar with that, it's essentially an economic model of Bitcoin that maps out the supply, and based off the supply, it gives you a fair market value of what the Bitcoin would be considering the supply. And long story short, my view is that based off that model, we still have a lot more room to go up. But I think that the crash that we're seeing right now is just a short-term correction that's been predominantly put forth by, larger moneyed interest hedge funds, the institutions that are getting into crypto right now. I think that they facilitated this crash so that they can make money on the way down. But I think long-term, we still got quite a bit of room. I think we'll see probably a crash, like a big crash, where everybody's going to hate it again, late 2021, early 2022. But then there's also the other argument that the monetary system as a whole is moving toward in this direction, and it's going to. You can make an argument that there's going to be less of a crash than there has been in previous years, I think, but that's anybody's guess.
It kind of seems like the Chinese government has been talking down crypto, because there's been several occasions where they've said, we're banning it or we're taking some action against it. And it seems like every time they do that, it goes down. And this time, it didn't seem like anything really changed. I mean, I don't see any evidence that China actually changed any of its policies. They just came out and talked about Bitcoin or about crypto in general, saying that they were going to crack down on it, and the prices went down. And it kind of makes me wonder if crypto isn't kind of coming into the same mainstream space where the stock market and commodities markets exist, where they're manipulated by super rich people and they pretty much set the price up or down as they wish.
You're saying it does do that, or it doesn't do that?
It seems like it's coming into that space.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. It's because it's getting bigger. I mean, these people have such a profit incentive, and that's how their entire mind works, that they're going to get into the market, and that's, I think, what we're seeing.
But it also seems like the super rich people and the institutions that help them invest are just now starting to get into crypto. Like Chase Bank just the other day put out a press release about introducing or setting up some kind of crypto platform for their clients.
Yeah, it's still early, and right now we are seeing, probably from 8 months ago up till now, you really started seeing that narrative ramp up where you're getting institutional buy-in. Something I find interesting is, back during the 2017 bull run, I remember one famous story where Jamie Dimon, the CEO of Chase, came out and called Bitcoin a fraud.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
And it's like anybody that's like really in the space, they see that and they're like, okay, they're just creating a narrative so they can buy in cheap because they've got so much money that they need a period of time to get in. Otherwise, they're going to shoot the price up. If they go all in with the amount that they're trying to put in all at once, they can't do that. They have too much money. So they have to suppress the price with a narrative, and I think that's what that was.
Yeah, it seems like with, the market cap of some of the bigger ones are like, I guess, Bitcoin is at like 600 billion now. Ethereum is 200 billion. Tether is 59 billion. That seems like a lot, but I think if you look at the amount of money that's out there available to be invested, that people have invested in stocks or bonds or whatever, it's a few hundred billion is a drop in the bucket. And so it seems like even though we've seen Bitcoin go from less than a penny to $50,000, it seems like it could still go substantially higher from there, maybe even exponentially higher.
Yeah, long term, I think it's a good bet. Just being in the space in general. The comparison I make is that it's kind of like the tech stocks in prior to that 2000 period where we had the tech bubble, which I wasn't at all aware of economics or trading at that point because I was just a little kid. But from what I've heard, back in that period, you had banks coming out and like denouncing these things and spreading fear about them and generally turning the public away. Meanwhile, they were getting in on them. And then when they run up, that's the story of the retail investor versus the institutional investor with everything. The institutions manipulate the narrative to get the public to do what they want, and then the institutions reap the rewards because the public fell into the trap that the institutions set. And the story's the same. Like, you got a whole bunch of people now, like you'll go on any crypto discussion channel and everybody's panicking because of this crash, and they don't realize they just got played. So I have pretty strong opinions on that, but I'm just holding through. I haven't touched anything. Long term, I think we're good to go.
Right on. So you think a lot of these crashes are just that a big component in these crashes is the big banks and the super rich trying to get in at a lower price?
With this recent crypto crash, I think it was definitely a manipulated big bank thing. I think you can make an argument that in 2017, parts of some of the crashes may have had some of that influence, but I wouldn't make a really strong case for that. I think prior to that, cryptocurrency as a whole was too small for them to care, and they also, banks and institutions do things very slowly, so I don't think they were in it at all in 2013. That was before I was in it. 2017, maybe you can make an argument. This time they're getting into it, and I think this the crash we're experiencing right now is definitely a manipulated thing, at least in my mind.
Right on. Okay, I want to talk about law a little bit, and the way we got started talking about law is that you did this thing with your passport where you signed up for it a different way, and do you want to talk a little bit about that and how that works? Yeah, so
let me preface this a little bit. When the whole, lockdown happened, and then followed by the mask mandate happened, I just kind of started questioning things, and I had already been into I wouldn't say into law, but I knew a little bit about how the government worked, more than the average person at least. But when that mask mandate came out, the question in my mind was like, okay, how does this work? How does one dude 300 miles away from us tell us what we put on our face? And I realized, after looking into it and reading through things and learning what the definitions mean, that they actually aren't. And then because I started looking into that, I had an interest in, just law in general, more generally. And if you look back in history, they used the same mechanisms that they used to dupe people into putting masks on in the past with every government scam. So that led me down the rabbit hole of the status correction and the passport thing that I've mentioned to you. And the basis of it is just that there are different legal statuses in America. Originally, from the outset and the founding of the country, the only way to be a citizen in America would be to be a citizen of a state, the individual state, being New York, California, Oklahoma, whatever it might be. But then after the Civil War, they passed the 14th Amendment, which created a federal citizenship. And through that, the federal government is able to directly influence individuals' lives, whereas before they were not able to do that. And over time, the government has put their forms and their the way they interact with the people. They've set it up in such a way that people unknowingly become federal citizens when they don't necessarily have to, which subjects them to things that they would not otherwise be subject to. But it's all happening unknowingly.
So they're kind of tricking people into agreeing or to opting into this system that's voluntary.
To put it as bluntly as possible, yeah. Yeah.
Through deep deception.
Yeah.
And so I guess one of the things that people say about this state citizen passport is that when you use your passport as the ID to get it, and you fill out the application in a particular way to say that you're not a U.S. citizen, then you get when you get your passport card, it has 5 stars on it. And if you do it the normal way, it only has 3 stars. And I've seen that your passport card, I don't think the camera will pick it up from here, but your passport card has 3 stars at the top. 5 stars, and mine has 3 stars. So at least that part of the story adds up. Why does yours have 5 stars and mine only has 3? Maybe there's some other reason, but it's at least plausible that that's what's going on.
Yeah, so it's a good question. And if you internally, you're not actually going to know what the stars mean unless you're internal to the State Department. They won't let you know. I haven't done this personally, but from what I have heard is that people who call the State Department, they'll tell them that the stars are for national security.
Uh-huh.
Now, I don't think that the stars specifically mean...
national security means just we won't tell you what it's about?
I can't answer that, because again, I haven't called specifically to ask on that. I'm just going off of what I've heard on that. But if you piece together, if you look at people who have done this process, and you compare to enough times, the things add up that that's what it means. Personally, I don't think the stars specifically mean a certain citizenship status. I think it's just a clearance level, but a way to get that clearance level would be to become a state citizen as opposed to a federal citizen.
And can you talk a little bit about the differences in how you fill out the application?
So if you look at the passport application, the DS-11, first off, there's 2. There's one to apply for a new passport, and there's one to apply for, or to renew a current passport. If you want to do this, you have to apply for a new one. So you need to use the DS-11, not the DS-82. When you get the DS-11, you need to fill out your mailing address like normal. You need to check no to being a U.S. citizen for both you and both of your parents. You need to, in the there's a mailing address, and then on the page after that there is a domicile. I forget the actual term that they use, but it's like your permanent address, which is that's telling them where you're jurisdictionally in. The mailing address is just where they're sending the mail, so you can just put it down like normal there. In the one on the page after that, the permanent address, you need to spell out your state. You can't use a 2-letter abbreviation. You need to omit the zip code, among some other things. Then, and this, so probably the most important thing is to make sure you check no to U.S. citizen. But if you just do that with the DS11, it's not really going to work. If you also read the DS11, there's the acts and conditions section, which is a couple pages before where you actually fill out your information. In the acts and conditions section, it tells you if any of these acts and conditions do not apply to you, include a supplementary explanatory statement under oath, which means you write up your own document, get it notarized, stating who you are. So you need to write up your own document explaining that you're a state citizen and not a federal citizen. And this is where you really need to understand what's happening. So you need to go do research for a few months to understand all of the differences and the court cases that have indicated these differences, and cite them in your explanatory statement, and very clearly lay out for people, or whoever's reading this, what you're claiming, so that they can't just throw you in a different box. So yeah, in short, that's a bird's eye view of what you need to do if you want to apply that way. There's other videos you can find on YouTube that would explain it in much more detail, which I'd recommend watching. Primarily among them would be the YouTube channel. His name is James C. Lovett, and he talks about this extensively. I learned how to actually fill out the form from watching that. And I mean, there's other people that talk about the differences here. Yeah,
and all of these links are going to be in the show notes, so you can look at them for yourself.
I kind of lost my train of thought there.
So when you have this state citizen passport, then they say that you can drive or you can travel in your car, and I guess they make a distinction between traveling and driving is only for commercial purposes. So if you travel in your car without a driver's license or a registration or insurance, and you just have this state citizen passport, and you get pulled over by the police, people say that they will not be able to give you a ticket and they'll just let you go.
Yeah, so just full disclosure, I don't have any explicit plans to ever do this, but it's not necessarily that you need to be a state citizen to do that, but it makes it a lot easier. Reason being is, in theory, when law enforcement runs your passport, it's going to show up as a different status in their system than somebody who has a regular passport, which is basically just going to tell them, hey, don't screw with this guy. Again, I can't prove that without having access to the police computer systems. But really, just getting a piece of plastic, being the passport, isn't going to solve anything. What you really need to know is the legal distinctions between these things, so that you can make the proper claims, not fall into their linguistic traps, and explain exactly what you're doing, such that it's in accordance with what the law actually is. Similar to the mask mandate thing, the whole getting a driver's license and getting insurance is a similar scam where they duped people into doing it by making people not understand the law, and they count on the people's ignorance of the law to facilitate the system as it is. And it's really just a revenue collection racket, right? I mean, tickets just, they provide revenue to the state. A lot of times, if you get into a conversation with a normal person about this topic, they'll be defending the ticketing system, and they'll say, no, you're putting people at risk, so you're hurting society. So what I say is, okay, if you're hurting society by speeding, then why is the punishment for speeding a fine that gets paid to the judge and the prosecuting attorney, and why is the punishment not community service? if the punishment, if society's the victim, then shouldn't the punishment be helping society by doing community service rather than lining the pockets of an attorney and a judge?
Well, I think someone who's arguing for that system would say, well, it all goes into one big pot, and the government does all kinds of wonderful things to make everyone's lives better.
That's where, again, people are ignorant of what actually happens, and that's why they support these systems, because they never looked into it.
Well, there are actually videos of people that do this, that drive around without a driver's license and without
well, in this case, they travel around without a driver's license.
Right.
Because as soon as you say the word drive, that's in legal terms, right? In layman's terms, we say drive, and we just mean we're going point A to point B in a car. In legal terms, that implies that you're acting in a commercial capacity, which means you have a passenger in the car. A passenger is also another word which has a different meaning. But a passenger implies that the person is paying you to transport them, as opposed to a guest, which would just be a friend in your car that you're traveling with. Another way to be acting in a commercial capacity would be to be transporting cargo for hire. So if somebody gives me a pallet of computers that they want me to transport and they pay me to do it, you're driving.
And I guess that's a common thing throughout this law movement, is that the definitions of words become very important, and a lot of legal words don't actually mean what they seem to.
One that's very interesting is includes. So if you go through the law, any whatever the state regulations, federal regulations, statutes and whatnot, in layman's terms, when we say includes, we mean, I could say, hey, I was hanging out with Albert, including Andy and some other people. And that could mean all of those things are included in, but not limited to those people, right? It could there'd be other people there too. When you read a statute and it says includes, it means specifically whatever follows and nothing else. If it means other things past just what's right after includes, it would say includes but not limited to. That would imply an expansive that would be expansive.
An expansive definition of include.
Yeah.
And that goes for like the driving and traveling thing, that that you have to be clear, if you get pulled over in the situation that you're just traveling and not driving. And then you can see in the videos that the police will kind of try to play word games, to try to get you to admit that you're driving.
Right.
And let me go ahead and show one of these videos. This guy, I'm not going to show the whole video, I'm just going to show a little clip of it. But this guy is driving in Maryland. He has no tag on his plate. He's got no driver's license, no insurance. He's got his VIN covered up so that they can't read it. And he's carrying a gun. He does have a permit for the gun. So you can see here, we're close to the end of the video. The police have pulled him out of the car. They've handcuffed him. They've taken his gun. They've read his VIN, and then they've gone to their computer, their police computer, and they've done research. And here's what they say when they come back to him.
You guys did a very fine job tonight. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Yeah, it faces that way. Yeah. You did a good job too, man. I'm just gonna put this right here, okay? Thank you so much.
So when the cop says, I'm going to just put this right here, he's putting his gun back in his holster. And then they give him back his state citizen passport, and they let him go.
So what I find really interesting about this is if you watch the whole video, at the beginning, when the cop first comes up to him, before he explains that he's a foreign national, the cop threatens to tow his car if there's no insurance. And then he discovers that there's no insurance, that there's no tag, no registration, or it's a dummy tag, so it's not registered to anything, it's just like a random tag. And then the cop runs his stuff, and he comes back and issues 2 warnings rather than towing the car, which he initially said he would do if the condition of having no insurance was met, which it was. So something's going on here, right? I mean, if anybody doesn't believe this, everything we're saying, something's going on.
Yeah, and this particular guy has 3 videos where he gets pulled over, and all 3 times they let him go. And there's other videos that we'll put in the show notes where the same thing happens to other people. You know, the cops pull them over, they say, oh, well, we're going to tow your car if it's not registered and insured. And they go back to their computer and check stuff, and next thing you know, they're letting him go.
He's not really talking his way out of it or talking at all?
No, he talks. He
does?
Yeah.
He talks quite a bit.
So something that's specifically important is when you become a state citizen, to the police, you're technically a foreign national. So he introduces himself as a foreign national. If you read the the United States Department of State handbook on law enforcement training for dealing with foreign nationals, you can look through it, and on page 12, it states that for the purposes of this manual, a foreign national is defined as anybody who's not a U.S. citizen. There are some cases where somebody can be not a foreign national and not a U.S. citizen, which would mean they're stateless. And then if you go to page 13, there's another section right there that says, most but not all people born in the United States are U.S. citizens. So, if we look at those 2 statements together, anybody who's born in the United States but is not a U.S. citizen, by those definitions, is a foreign national to the police. When you sign up for a state citizen passport, you mark no to the question, are you a U.S. citizen? And then they send you a passport. So by definition, you're not a U.S. citizen. And definitionally, in the police manual, anybody who isn't a U.S. citizen is a foreign national. So they use the words to scare people and make them think that it doesn't apply to them, when in reality, if you read into it, it does. By that definition to the police, I am a foreign national, so I have an obligation to introduce myself to the police as such in the event of a traffic stop.
Yeah, and it seems like there's a lot of disinformation out there. When I was trying to look into this, you know, if I would search for things like sovereign citizen or common law, I would find these websites that are saying stuff that turns out to be nonsense. And I think there's 2 things going on there. I think part of it is that a lot of people that are into this kind of stuff are just confused and don't know what they're doing, and they are just kind of make stuff up, or they hear stuff from other people that's nonsense and they repeat it. And I think the other part of it is that there's a lot of people that are intentionally misleading people, because I think they don't really want us to do this, and so there's a lot of disinformation out there.
Yeah, I would argue there's a lot of government agents out there that deliberately spread stuff that confuses people. They just talk about random crap all day that sounds good and it gets people distracted, and also they conflate terms to get people confused on that. If you really want to do this, you really do have to develop a willingness to sit down, read, and comprehend things, and also look up the definitions of, or the legal definitions of words that you're confused about, so that you can actually understand what's being said. If you're not willing to do that, you really shouldn't do it. Yeah, I'd say that.
Yeah, I get the impression that this whole, it's hard to know what to call it, because sovereign citizen is kind of an oxymoron. You know, if you're a sovereign, then you're not a citizen, because a sovereign is, you know, is separate from everything, whereas a citizen is part of a organized group. And common law is another common phrase that people use, but that doesn't really fit either, does it?
So, okay, I'll talk about we had this discussion about the word sovereign a couple of days ago, and I came up with a more clear mental model in my head for how to classify and use the word. So the word sovereign can be used in the sense of an adjective or a noun. In the sense of an adjective, I would describe myself as I am sovereign, in the sense that I decide what happens in my life and I'm the director of my life. If you use sovereign in the noun sense, saying I am a sovereign, I wouldn't describe myself that way, because that would imply that I am the head of a collection of land, I am the primary director of that, and I have a citizenry that's under me. I don't have that, so I'm not that. Then if we look at the word sovereign citizen, which is a noun as well, it's just a ridiculous term. It doesn't make any sense at all. You can't be the head of something and then also a part of it. It's like jumbo shrimp. In my opinion, the word is just a label that the government created to kukify and make anybody who looks into the law sound crazy. Because when you actually read it, you realize this stuff's real if you actually take the time to learn the words and do the discernment. But because they put that word in the media and they associate it with crazy people, which there are a lot of crazy people that do this type of thing, anytime that words like that get used in common speech, people that watch the news, they instantly have this mental heuristic in their head where it just throws up a red flag and they like immediately try to distance themselves. Something that I think is interesting. If you look at the Trump's campaign trail, right? He constantly talked about building a wall and aliens. He's like, illegal aliens, illegal aliens, illegal aliens, illegal aliens, right? What did that do? What did that accomplish? Well, the people that follow Trump, in generalizing here, tend to be less supportive of the government, less supportive of taxes, that type of a thing. And in those people, it created a red flag in their mind where the word alien automatically means runaway, it automatically means bad, it automatically means wrong or unlawful. Whereas in some circumstances and in to certain government agencies, the way that they would define a state citizen is an alien. So then if somebody were to go to one of these people who would follow Trump that fell into that linguistic trap and mention something about aliens, that person's immediately going to be turned off and run away. So I would argue that was a government psyop, and it was a social engineering campaign to create negative associations with the word alien, among other things. But that would be one of the goals in my view, at least.
What about common law? Why is that not a good term for this?
It doesn't. From people that look into the common law, people that are zealots about the words common law just tend to oversimplify things in my experience. I haven't gotten super deep into this stuff, but from what I've seen of them, they think that it's just about, they just oversimplify things. I can't quite communicate my opinion as precisely as I would want here. Yeah, it seems like this whole area is very difficult and dangerous, and I think it seems like a lot of people watch a couple of YouTube videos and think, oh, I can drive without a license or whatever. Well, you can't drive without a license.
Or travel. If I just say that I'm traveling, then I can drive without a license. And it's not that simple. And even the gurus of the movement, people who have spent their whole lives studying this subject and teaching other people about it, frequently end up in prison. People like Winston Shrout, Irwin Schiff, Dean Clifford, I'm going to put one of Dean Clifford's videos in the show notes, and he's very knowledgeable and has been studying this stuff for a long time. But even he wound up in prison at one point, and he says, if he knew then what he knows now, he wouldn't have wound up in prison. But I think it's clear that this isn't something that you would want to go into lightly. I mean, I think what you did is kind of a baby step, just getting the state citizen passport. And when I think about doing that, I feel a little bit nervous that puts me on some kind of list to get hassled by the government or whatever. But it seems like, on the other hand, it does seem like a very reasonable first step toward just investigating this field and learning about it.
Yeah, I mean, I'd agree with that. I feel like there's a lot there to unpack, and I can't quite make a real response on all of it at once.
Well, I guess what I'm getting at is, I don't want anyone to, watch this video and then go to show notes and watch a couple of videos of people getting let go by the police and then think, oh, well, now I can drive around without my license and I'll just say that I'm traveling if they pull me over and it'll be great.
Yeah, okay, so I'll make some comments on that. I would strongly discourage anybody from doing this unless you're going to sit down for 3 months and figure out exactly what's happening to the point where you can explain it yourself. If you can't explain it yourself, you shouldn't do it. The other thing is, if you're afraid of confrontation or standing up for yourself, it's also not for you. They will test, right? Like, I'll give you an example just for like when I applied for the passport, the postal clerk tried to trick me into filling it out differently, right? So I had to she signed everything, she filled some stuff out on my application, and then she asked me to sign. I had to read through everything, know what everything said, and realize that she put something down that would have, if I signed that form, denied the passport. Then I had to refill out the form while I was there and tell her that no, this is how I'm applying, in order before I signed. So, like, you really have to have a working understanding of all the principles. Otherwise, it's not a good idea to do.
And you've been looking into this a lot, right? You spent
about 6 months now, yeah.
So even after doing it for 6 months, you felt ready to go and get this special kind of passport, but you haven't actually made the jump to, like, not having insurance.
No, I don't have any explicit plans to do that. I mean, it's essentially just paying it to not get hassled, right? Because if you don't have a tag, or if you got a different tag, the chances of you just getting being hassled by the police is high, and I don't want to invite that. So, like, the small amount of money that I pay to register my car and pay for insurance is worth it. And then the other thing is, if you don't have insurance, then you don't have insurance, right? So, well, yeah, that's a personal decision. I haven't made any explicit decisions to do that.
So what are your plans with this? What's the purpose of getting this state citizen passport?
It's primarily just a preventative measure. Like, there's certain things that aren't crimes that people get punished for, and I don't want to put myself in a position where I'm subject to that. Right? Like, I mean, an example is, okay, so I haven't done this personally, but I can explain the reasons why and the theory behind it. In theory, state citizen cannot be searched by the TSA. Reason being, if you look at on its surface, you got the Fourth Amendment and the Fifth Amendment. Fourth Amendment's, I'm paraphrasing here, but it basically says that the rights of the people to travel and be free of unreasonable searches and seizures will not be infringed, right? I'm paraphrasing, it's not the exact verbiage. And then the Fifth Amendment, it basically says the government, no, I'm sorry, that's not the Fifth Amendment. Anyway, one of the amendments in the Bill of Rights states that the government will not take property without just compensation. So, if you look at those two on the surface, when you go through the TSA, there's no suspicion of a crime, and they're going through your stuff. And then, if they find innocent items like toothpaste or a water bottle that's above a certain threshold, they take them and they don't pay for those items. So, just on the surface there, how are they doing that if it's in if it's on the surface at least in direct conflict with the Constitution, the highest law in the land? The answer is, when you're a federal citizen, you're not a party to the Constitution, and they don't apply to you, right? And then jurisdictionally, airports, from my understanding, are federally controlled, right? So you're a federal citizen in a federal zone, and you don't have those constitutionally protected rights are not constitutionally protected in that context.
So theoretically, the TSA might not be able to search you when you go through the airport?
that would be yes.
Do you think you could get on an airplane without a mask right now?
Well, I think that'd be that. I mean, okay. I think that anybody could do that if they sent the proper letters, but I don't think it'd be worth the hassle. And I think that you'd be fighting a real uphill battle trying to swim against the river there, right? So
just curious, because like I haven't seen anything like that yet. Anyone getting past the mask brigade?
I've actually heard of people that have at the airport. I mean, I haven't confirmed it or seen it on video, but I have heard about it.
Okay, yeah, just in talking with people who've been traveling, like even people who would normally not wear a mask like, at all costs, experiencing that, and it's like, ooh. You know?
Something I find interesting about the mask thing is, okay, like most of the people that are pushing for it are always like the democracy, and okay, if you look before the mask mandate, what I observed, at least here, was probably 70% of people, if not 80% of people, didn't wear them.
Mm-hmm.
So if we were to go off that and have a democratic vote, the vast majority of people would say that they wouldn't have ever wanted a mask mandate, which was never even where the mandate is for government employees.
Uh-huh.
But then the same people that are arguing about the importance of democracy are conversely doing something completely anti-democratic and arguing that everybody needs to be forced to wear these even against their will, right? So I just found that as a very blatant example of cognitive dissonance, where these people didn't even think through their opinions, right?
Do you think it was only 70 or 80%? Do you think 70 or 80% were wearing masks?
No, I'm saying before the mandate, in June of 2020.
Yeah.
I saw maybe 20% of people wearing them.
Okay.
And so if you were actually if you were to run a vote, it seemed like 80% of people wouldn't have gone with it.
Yeah, it seems like there's a lot of cognitive dissonance, or even doublethink, where people think democracy, but what they actually have in mind is just everybody doing what I think they should.
Yeah. Yeah.
And democracy, as we all know, it's literally mob rule. I mean, if 6 out of 10 people say, hey, I think it's a good idea today to kill black people, everybody's going to go around and start killing black people. You know what I mean? So that's what democracy literally is. It's mob rule, If they decide on one thing, 4 people now have to be under the system of that,
Yeah, the thing I always say, like, if somebody gets super, like, democracy, I was just like, okay, hey, everybody, 10 people in a room, hey, let's take a vote. Who thinks that person should all buy us dinner?
Right.
And everybody, 9 people, they'll vote, hey, we want dinner. Well, looks like you just got a bill.
Well, the reality is, though, we don't live in a democracy. It's a democratic republic, which is still, I think, any kind of representative government is a scam, because the representatives are always going to represent themselves. But
yeah, I think we need just vast decentralization and self-rule. Like, I don't
do the literal opposite of everything they've told us to do. I usually start there, and then from that point out, it's like. But yeah, you're right. Like decentralized, localized. Just like we all have always said about the gardens, like that's the possible best solution in that regard, because you're literally growing money in the ground, money you don't have to spend.
Money doesn't grow on trees, but food sure does.
Well, my brother, who used to grow a lot of marijuana, used to say, "Who says money don't grow on trees?" It's a pretty good point. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think we're actually headed in a good direction with this Freedom Cell group, because we're building a community, and we're learning how to grow food, and I think it's this is probably the most valuable thing that we could be doing to resist the Great Reset agenda, is to just withdraw from their system as much as possible and just do our own thing outside of the system.
And build relationships along the way, because that's been a theme at every meetup we've had, is like, we all know we can't do this alone. So it's like, it's overwhelming when you think about it being a solo kind of thing. I think most of us probably want our own place and everything, but things are changing quick, and we're definitely gonna need people. And we've talked in this group about maybe getting land somewhere, and just keep building out this group. That's what it's about. They want us isolated, and we did the exact opposite. We got connected with each other, and more so now than I would say, at least I've witnessed in my lifetime, people coming together from all different perspectives and religious beliefs even. You don't really see that often, where people with different religious beliefs like actually get together in a real type of community. We have that in our group.
Yeah, for me, this COVID thing has actually made my life better. I met a bunch of interesting people, and I have these community gardens going on that I'm involved in, and I'm going out and doing fun stuff with interesting people almost every weekend.
Smoking pot together.
And I think that's probably a good note to end on. So I want to thank you, Brad, for being here, for sharing your wisdom about crypto and law, and Andy, thank you for being here to film us and for chiming in on the debate.
Yeah.
And this has been Albert's Adventures Part 3, Episode 4.
Come out in your millions.